Hello everyone, I'm Mindang, and you're listening to Hidden Corners of the Case. Amidst the wild grassy hills lies a lonely pink dress, and on the victim's palm, a hastily written string of numbers, like a message from the darkness. From that chilling crime scene, the case file opened up a series of clues stretching over 18 years. Phone calls from public booths, furtive cash withdrawals, and a quiet rented house, as if deliberately erased of all traces. Who wrote that string of numbers, and what was it meant to point to? A person, a date, or a code from the mastermind behind the scenes? If you're ready, let's travel back in time together, piecing together every small clue to reveal the bigger picture hidden beneath the pink dress on Mok Chau Hill. On March 15, 2006, in a hilly area not far from the center of Mok Chau district, a middle-aged couple left their home early with the intention of picking some rare medicinal herbs. According to their account, at around 7:30 in the morning, the two of them were slowly surveying the hillside to look for the necessary bushes. The husband suddenly noticed a strange object that looked like a pair of legs sticking out from behind a low bush. At first, both of them hesitated, finding it hard to believe that they were actually human legs, since this area was rarely visited by people. However, a sense of unease quickly urged them to move closer to check. The wife whispered that it might just be a piece of wood or an old mannequin, while the husband insisted that something was off. As they approached the sloping ground, they were immediately stunned and terrified. Just as they had sensed, it was indeed a pair of human legs, exposed at the edge of the earth, with no shoes on. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the couple didn't dare linger. They hurriedly ran down to a nearby residential area to seek help. They used a landline phone at a local household and immediately reported the incident to the Mok Chau District Police. The report was quickly received, and a team of officers from the District Criminal Investigation Unit set out at once. However, the road up the hill was rough and difficult to traverse. The specialized vehicle had to overcome many steep sections before reaching the spot where the couple was waiting. By the time the police arrived at the scene, around 9 a.m., the two witnesses immediately pointed toward the bushes on the hillside, where they had first discovered the horrifying scene. The head of the investigation team ordered the scene to be preserved as is, while dividing the team. One group went down to the foot of the hill to cordon off the area, and the other proceeded directly to the location of the body. Just as reported, the police saw the body of a woman lying face down. Her pink dress had been pulled up almost to her waist, and she was not wearing any underwear on her lower body. The victim's hands were tied behind her back with a thin rope. The body was lying right at the edge of a slight slope, surrounded by sparse bushes. This was not a place where people usually passed by, making the presence of the corpse even more unusual. After confirming that the victim was dead, the technical team proceeded to photograph the scene and take basic notes. The victim was lying face down, with long hair spread out over the damp soil. At a glance, the examination team noted a large wound at the back of the victim's head, causing a patch of hair to be matted with dried blood, and deep ligature marks were clearly visible on the wrists. On the neck, arms and both thighs, there were numerous scratches and severe bruises, leading those present to suspect violent acts had occurred before the victim's death. Some members of the investigation team were reminded of cases involving assault and murder, as the state of the clothing and the way the wrists were bound suggested the victim had been subdued. The deputy technician also pointed out an area of lighter skin on the neck and left wrist, indicating that the victim had worn a watch or bracelet for a long time. Additionally, the victim had pierced ears but was not wearing earrings, leading everyone to suspect that valuable jewelry might have been taken by the perpetrator. From this, a preliminary hypothesis was formed. The perpetrator acted brutally to rob the victim, or for another purpose, then dumped the body in the deserted hill area. Without hesitation, the police chief immediately ordered a wide cordon around the surrounding area. A forensic officer, after checking the body temperature and signs of decomposition, determined that the victim had been dead for about 2 days, meaning the incident could have occurred on March 13, 2006. Upon closer examination, the forensic expert noticed that in addition to the head wound, there was subcutaneous hemorrhaging on the victim's neck, and severe damage to the hyoid bone, suggesting that the victim had been strangled until suffocation. At this point, no official conclusion could be made, but the initial assumption was that the victim was strangled, then the head struck or was struck, causing a fatal injury. Bodily fluid from the vagina suggested possible semen. Police sealed it for DNA testing. During the area search, an officer found a fist-sized rock with dark marks, suspected to be dried blood. A few meters away, another team found fabric mixed with leaves. On closer inspection, they saw it was women's underwear. What was unusual was that the rock was on a high mound, while the victim's body was on the slope. If the victim had been assaulted on this mound and then pushed or rolled down, it would explain why her body was covered in so many leaves and dirt. The forensic technicians took blood samples from the rock to compare with the samples from the victim's body. Although the results were not immediately available at the scene, it was highly likely that this was the victim's blood. After completing the photography and evidence collection, the police moved the body to the temporary morgue in Mok Chau district for a detailed autopsy. The preliminary examination showed that the victim was about 40 to 45 years old, of average height around 1.57 meters, with long black hair down to her shoulders, lightly painted fingernails, and wearing a fairly new pink dress. This led the investigation team to believe that the victim might have come from an urban area, or at least had the means to take care of her appearance. The fact that no identification papers, personal belongings, or books were found nearby further reinforced the theory that the perpetrator deliberately disposed of or took possession of the victim's property. An important question was raised: why would a victim dressed so elaborately appear in the middle of this deserted hilly area? The head of the examination team noted that it was rare for a woman to enter the mountains wearing a pink dress and high heels unless she had a specific purpose. From this, he proposed two initial hypotheses. First, the victim may have voluntarily accompanied someone, possibly an acquaintance, and was attacked unexpectedly. Second, the victim was restrained elsewhere and then brought to this area by the perpetrator. Both scenarios lead to a common point. The perpetrator was likely acquainted with, or at least had the opportunity to approach, the victim proactively. Returning to the surrounding area, the investigation team split up to search every tree and bush, but they did not find any clear evidence. The sloping terrain and dense vegetation made it extremely difficult to find any trace of high heels, if the victim had worn them, or a handbag. All efforts ended in failure. No scraps of paper, wallets, or mobile phones were found, and even the slope below showed no tire tracks. A police officer speculated that the perpetrator might have acted at night, then left via a detour several hundred meters away, where the ground was hard and left few traces. Even though it was just a hypothesis, the police did not want to overlook any clues, but clearly, there were almost no identifiable traces left at the scene. By nearly noon on March 15, 2006, the investigation team temporarily concluded their work at the scene, bringing the body, samples, and photographs back to the center. The authorities decided to file the case as a murder with an unidentified victim, and at the same time contacted the civil department, hoping to review if anyone had gone missing in the past 2 days. However, at present, Mok Chau had not received any missing persons reports that matched the victim's age and physical characteristics. This area is mainly inhabited by long-term local residents, with few outsiders, so if the victim is not from here, the investigation will need to be expanded to neighboring districts and cities. To speed up the process, the agency prepared a description of the victim. About 40 years old, around 1.57 meters tall, tanned skin, long black shoulder-length hair, lightly polished fingernails, wearing a pink dress, and carrying no ID. This description would be sent through the police network, asking district and city units to check their missing persons lists. Meanwhile, technical specialists plan to analyze the semen sample, hoping the DNA database would help cross-reference if the perpetrator had a criminal record, or had submitted a sample before. However, this would take time. While waiting, some officers suggested checking service establishments nearby. If the victim was brought from elsewhere, it was likely both the perpetrator and victim had appeared on a bus, taxi, or at a gas station before entering the hill area. Although the investigation was still new and only scratching the surface, all the investigators agreed that this was a serious case. The victim was attacked, assaulted, brutally murdered, and her jewelry was stolen. For many years, there had never been a similar case in Huimuchao, which put great pressure on the authorities. Everyone was waiting for information from neighboring districts or from the victim's relatives. It was hoped that once the identifying features were made public, someone would come forward. Around 3 p.m. that same day, the forensic examination team began a thorough inspection at the morgue. They measured the bruises, created a detailed photographic record, and documented all the injuries to the head area. Upon observation, the back of the victim's head was clearly dented, with visible skull fractures, indicating an extremely strong impact. The examination team continued to inspect the neck area, both arms, and the collarbone. They discovered wind marks and finger-shaped bruises, confirming that the victim had been strangled to the point of suffocation before being attacked. The victim's body showed that the arm muscles were firm, indicating that she was someone who exercised regularly. However, when restrained with a rope and suddenly attacked, she had little chance to resist. By late afternoon, the head of the investigation team directed everyone to focus on compiling a quick report to send to higher authorities. He requested all members to coordinate closely and screen security cameras along the main roads leading to Mokchao district from March 13 to March 15, 2006. Although the area was isolated, there was still a national highway and many interprovincial routes nearby. He emphasized that if the victim had traveled by car, there was a chance she would appear on toll booth or roadside cameras. Checking these would require time and manpower, but this was an important lead. If they could find images of the victim with anyone else, it could be the key to solving the case. That same evening, within the Mokchao District Police Department, the team worked urgently to update the system. Several officers hurriedly compiled reports of missing persons from neighboring districts. Although there were no immediate results, they still hoped that the victim's relatives or friends would be able to identify her through the description. In these first days, the entire investigation team worked urgently, with everyone agreeing that quickly solving this murder case, which involved robbery and assault, was crucial. Identifying the victim was the top priority. The perpetrator could not yet be identified, but at the very least, uncovering the victim's background would open up new leads for the investigation. By the end of March 15, 2006, progress had paused at the stage of collecting evidence and planning. The victim remained unidentified, leaving behind no trace of family connections. The investigative agency was determined to intensify measures, from conducting DNA tests to reviewing relationships, in order to soon shed light on the identity of the mysterious woman who had died in the hills of Mokchao district. On March 16, 2006, less than 24 hours after the scene was discovered, the Mokchao District Police Station received information from a man named Ton Jia Hao, 70 years old, residing in Hongshuyen District. Mr. Hao contacted the duty line to report that his daughter, Ton Ting Nhi, 45 years old, had suddenly lost contact since March 13, 2006. As soon as he heard the description of the victim in the case at the hill area, he was shocked and wanted to come to identify her. Over the phone, his voice was very calm, showing no signs of fear or agitation, and he repeatedly emphasized that his daughter had shoulder-length hair and liked to wear dresses when going out, which matched the description in the internal notice. Immediately, the police arranged for him to come to the temporary morgue to identify the body. At around 10 a.m., Ton Jia Hao arrived at the temporary morgue. After completing the necessary identification procedures, he was invited into the body storage room. As soon as he saw the woman lying on the examination table, Mr. Hao bowed his head and confirmed it. It was indeed his daughter. To further confirm his certainty, an investigator showed him several close-up photos of the victim's body features. Mr. Hao immediately recognized distinctive details such as the pale skin on her wrist from years of wearing a watch, and a small mole next to the left collarbone. Ton Tin Nhi, 45 years old, residing in Hongshuyen district, owned a well-known restaurant in the area. According to Ton Jia Hao's initial statement on the morning of March 13, 2006, Ton Tin Nhi told the family that she was going out on personal business. He did not ask for details, only noticing that his daughter was dressed neatly in a pink dress, high heels, wearing a Rolex watch, white gold earrings, and a platinum necklace. She left the house by taxi at around 9 a.m. When Tong Tin Ni forgot her phone on the table, Mr. Hao ran out in time to return it to her. He saw her standing by the roadside waiting for a car, but he couldn't clearly see the license plate or the taxi company. After that, Mr. Hao went back into the restaurant and did not continue to watch. Regarding her assets, Tong Tin Ni usually carried a handbag, which likely contained an ATM card. Her finances were stable thanks to income from the restaurant and renting out property. Everything proceeded as usual until that evening, when Mr. Hao called his daughter but could not reach her. The next morning, Mr. Hao thought Tong Tin Ni was busy with personal matters or on a short business trip, but by March 15th, she still hadn't come home. Her phone was turned off, which made him worried. When he happened to learn that the police were looking for the relatives of a female victim, Mr. Hao immediately got in touch. Thanks to that, the police confirmed that the victim was indeed Tong Tin Ni. The head of the investigation team immediately ordered a blood sample to be taken from Mr. Hao for a DNA paternity test, although there was hardly any doubt left about the identity. The next question that arose was, why did Tong Tin Ni, after leaving home on March 13th, end up in a remote hilly area and get brutally murdered? Who was the last person to see her, or did anyone have a conflict with her? The police invited Mr. Hao to stay at the station to provide more information. Through his statement, they learned that Tong Tin Ni had been married but had divorced her ex-husband, Truong Kien Hoa, who also lived in Hongshuyen district. Regarding his financial situation, Mr. Hao said, "My former son-in-law didn't have a stable job, always jumping from one thing to another. My daughter broke up with him because she was fed up with that life." However, after the divorce, Truong Kien Hoa occasionally stopped by the shop, claiming he wanted to see Tong Tin Ni's child from a previous relationship, but the child had moved elsewhere. A few times, Truong Kien Hoa suggested getting back together, but was flatly rejected. According to Mr. Hao, on March 13, 2006, right after Tong Tin Ni left home, Truong Kien Hoa came looking for her. That was the last time Mr. Hao saw him. It was unclear whether Truong Kien Hoa managed to catch up with the taxi or not. Based on this information, the police immediately listed Truong Kien Hoa as a suspect. Around 2 p.m. on March 16, 2006, a team of detectives went to Truong Kien Hoa's residence on the outskirts of Hongshuyen town. Local residents said that he had been absent for several days. It took the police more than half the afternoon until dusk to finally determine Kien Hoa's temporary workplace in Binnan district nearby. An investigator called ahead to the factory manager, where he was on probation, to arrange a meeting with him the following morning. The manager confirmed that Kien Hoa had been at the company dormitory for several days and seemed to have just gone home today. Early in the morning on March 17, 2006, the police team directly approached Truong Kien Hoa at his residence. During the conversation, Kien Hoa admitted that on March 13, he did go to look for his ex-wife, but only met Tong Jia Hao, his father-in-law. Knowing that Tong Tin Ni had just left the house, Kien Hoa ran to the end of the alley, but didn't see her, so he gave up on trying to meet her. On his way home, he happened to run into an old friend, Tran Tri Quang, who introduced him to a job in Binhan district. Kien Hoa agreed, and from the afternoon of March 13, he went to the company to take a look, staying at the dormitory until March 16. Colleagues at the company confirmed that he was present continuously and did not leave unexpectedly. When the police asked about Tong Tin Ni's murder, Kien Hoa appeared surprised and answered no. He stated that after his unsuccessful visit to her house, he had not contacted her at all. A preliminary check showed that his statement matched confirmations from factory employees, the dormitory entry and exit logs, and the factory gate camera footage from the night of March 13. And on March 14, Kien Hoa was continuously present at his workplace and did not leave at all. A technician who shared the same room also confirmed this for March 14. He took a nap for the entire afternoon in the dormitory. All of this further supports the likelihood that Truong Kien Hoa was not directly involved. However, the police have not completely ruled him out because other motives remain unclear and there is no concrete evidence. The investigation team temporarily concluded that the victim's ex-husband was unlikely to have committed the crime during this period. After ruling out the hypothesis that Truong Kien Hoa was the perpetrator, the police shifted their investigation toward the victim's wide social network. According to Tong Gia Hao, Tong Tin Ni was an independent woman who knew many men. Some were just friends, while others had tried to court her. Running a restaurant allowed her to meet a diverse range of customers. The list of people who might have had a close relationship with Ton Ting Ni included dozens of names. The police divided into several teams, each taking statements from some people on the list, focusing on finding anyone who met Ton Ting Ni on March 13th or had any special arrangements with her. During the interrogation process, an officer happened to review details collected at the scene, 7 digits written in ink on the victim's left palm, which were still legible. At first, the investigation team simply thought the victim had written down a number to remember. At this point, an officer speculated that it could be a landline phone number, since in 2006, mobile phones were not yet common in some rural areas and many people still used landlines. If Ton Ting Ni wanted to quickly jot down a number but didn't have any paper, she might have written it directly on her hand. This hypothesis was immediately reported and verified. About 2 hours later, the police contacted the telecommunications unit to help check the 7-digit number to see if it matched any landline phone numbers in Hongjuyan district or the surrounding areas. The results showed that it was a subscriber in Bak Long village, Thach Bin town, Hongshuyan district, registered to a house rented by a man with the surname Lu. This information was quite surprising because previously, Ton Jiahao had not mentioned anyone with the surname Lu having any connection to his daughter outside of their family. Therefore, the police did not rule out the possibility that this could be an important clue. At around 4 p.m. on March 17, 2006, the investigation team immediately proceeded to Bak Luang village for an urgent inspection. There, they discovered a house that was tightly locked and deserted. Local residents said that the tenant only appeared occasionally, coming and going, and few people knew what this person actually did for a living. Combining this with a review of the call history on Ton Ting Ni's mobile phone, the technical team found that the last 3 calls she received on the night of March 10th and the morning of March 11th all originated from public phone booths near Thach Bin town. The cameras at each phone booth captured images of a man driving up, getting out to make brief calls, and then leaving. The car that appeared at all 3 locations looked the same, and the man seemed very hurried, quickly returning to his car after each call. From there, the police officially raised their suspicions. The person who used the landline number in Bak Luang village was also the one who called the victim before she disappeared. It can be inferred that Ton Ting Ni may have been involved on March 11th or 12th, leading to the subsequent tragedy. In that context, the house in Bak Luang village became the focus of the investigation. However, on the afternoon of March 17th when the police arrived, the house was completely deserted. Neighbors had no idea where the tenants had gone, the wooden door was tightly locked, and there were no signs of anyone living there. The chief decided to assign someone to keep watch and wait for the suspect to return, while the rest of the team focused on gathering other evidence. They tried to identify the man who hurriedly left the phone booth. The security camera only captured a vague outline, with no clear view of the license plate, requiring the investigators to scrutinize every frame meticulously. On the evening of March 17th, the team in charge reported a new lead from Ton Ting Ni's mobile data. A total of 3 calls were made from public phone booths. All of these took place in less than 2 days before she went missing. An officer remarked that if the suspect was afraid of being traced, he would use a public phone booth instead of his personal phone. This detail made the whole team even more suspicious about the sophistication of the stranger, even though the initial motive was still unclear. The act of using multiple different phone booths to call someone with money and running a restaurant like Ton Ting Ni showed that the plan was anything but simple. Late at night, the police compiled all the facts, but they still didn't have enough evidence to confirm that the caller was the perpetrator. But this was the only promising lead at the moment. While waiting for the landlord in Bak Long village to show up, the investigation team continued to review traffic camera footage from March 11th to March 13th. They hoped to capture footage of Ton Ting Ni walking with the mysterious man. At the same time, they continued meeting her relatives and friends to find out if anyone knew Ton Ting Ni mentioned the person she was supposed to meet the previous weekend, or if anyone had tried to persuade her to collaborate on something. These efforts were still incomplete and would require more time to clarify. On the same day, the results of the initial autopsy provided additional important details. In addition to signs of strangulation and severe head trauma, the forensic doctor noted that the victim's genital area had suffered serious injuries. A semen sample was carefully preserved, ready to be sent for analysis. An officer commented, "If the suspect's name is in the criminal database, the police will quickly track them down. If not, the search for the suspect will become more complicated, requiring the comparison of multiple sources of information." From here, the entire investigation focused on three main directions. First, identifying the last person to have contact with Ton Tin Nhi. Second, clarifying the identity and current whereabouts of the person who rented the house in Tong Bak Luang. And third, checking other men on the victim's list of friends, partners, and acquaintances. The atmosphere at the police station became extremely urgent and tense. By the end of March 17, 2006, the clearest lead was still just the detail that the victim had written down a strange phone number and then received multiple calls from public phone booths near the time of her disappearance. All of this indicated that Ton Tin Nhi had arranged to meet a specific person, but the true identity of this individual remained a mystery. No one dared to assert that this was the perpetrator, as the case still required more concrete evidence. Mr. Ton Jia Hao cooperated closely, ready to provide any information about his daughter's habits and relationships. However, even he could not know all of Ton Tin Nhi's acquaintances, especially those she met at restaurants. The investigation quietly moved into the screening phase, gradually verifying suspicions related to the mysterious man, with the goal of gradually uncovering the secrets behind this tragedy. On the morning of March 18, 2006, the task force was dispatched to Bak Luang Hamlet, Thach Bin Town, Hong Shuyen District to continue verifying the landline phone number and the house that was locked. They coordinated with local police and asked around the neighborhood. A neighbor revealed that the owner of the house rarely appeared. He was often away, sometimes returning late, and would be gone again the next morning. According to accounts, this man was over 50 years old. He was reserved and lived very discreetly, rarely engaging in close conversations with anyone. Neighbors had seen him driving an old car, with a faded license plate that made it unclear where it was registered. Occasionally, he would bring a few friends home, stay for a few days, then lock up and leave again without anyone knowing where he went. This information was still insufficient to verify the identity or occupation of the homeowner, so the police team was forced to look for other clues to continue their investigation. An officer suggested checking the call history of the landline at the house. The technical department of the Tuyen Hong Shuyan police provided a list of incoming and outgoing calls from the past 10 days. Investigators paid attention to several outgoing calls made on March 10 and March 11, which matched the time frame when the victim's relatives reported receiving mysterious calls. The list also showed that this line was rarely used, which was unusual. For nearly a month prior, there were no calls at all, but suddenly on March 10 and 11, there was a flurry of calls. There were also a few short missed calls, but their content was unclear. All of this suggests that the person using the phone deliberately made multiple calls in quick succession and then disappeared. This indicates careful planning and intent. While the technical team was busy compiling the data list, another investigative team was assigned to visit the 3 public phone booths previously identified through camera footage, to directly question the managers and nearby vendors. The results showed that no one knew the identity of the middle-aged man who appeared in the blurry images. A convenience store owner recounted that he often bought phone cards or prepared small change in advance. After making a call, he would leave very quickly, never wearing a uniform or any distinctive clothing. However, when the police showed a few photos taken from the camera, the stall owner immediately recognized him. Yes, that's the man, about middle-aged, a bit stocky, with short hair. There were no further clues. At the same time, the special investigation team proposed reviewing locations the suspect might have visited, such as gas stations, small eateries, and repair shops around intersections. However, many places were not equipped with security cameras, or the cameras were positioned too far away, resulting in blurry and lacking detail images. Several gas stations in Thach Bin Town reported that on March 10 and 11, many cars stopped by to refuel. but no one could recall any specific features of the old car. The license plate was not distinctive, and it was driven by a middle-aged man. These limited descriptions made it difficult to identify the mysterious individual, while also suggesting that the suspect had used various tricks to avoid leaving any traces. After a day of effort, the only clear result was that the house in Bak Luang village had been rented by someone with the surname Lu. On the morning of March 19, 2006, the investigation team went to meet the authorities of Thatch Bin town, requesting records of residents, rental contracts, or temporary residence documents related to this house. The secretary of the Luke town office searched for quite a while before finding the name of the person who registered, Ton Lakan, 56 years old, originally from another province. According to the records, he began renting at the end of 2005. He registered his purpose as residence, but did not specify his occupation. The town had requested additional employment information, but had not received a response. The landlord did not live in Bak Luang village, only knowing that Mr. Lu paid rent every 3 months, usually slipping the envelope through the door slot when the landlord was absent. From here, the name Ton Lakan officially appeared in the investigation file. Although no conclusions had been drawn yet, he became a key figure because he was directly connected to the phone numbers found in the victim's hand and the calls made from the public phone booth. The case committee ordered that efforts be made to contact or meet Ton Lakan directly to verify. However, this proved difficult. The man was not at home, the door was tightly locked, and it was quiet inside. Neighbors confirmed that they had not seen his vehicle for many days. Around 2 p.m. on March 19, 2006, 2 detectives got closer, observing from outside through a window with iron bars. They saw that the room was completely empty, with no large furniture. Only in the corner of the house did there seem to be a few cardboard boxes. Since they did not have permission to search, the police could not break in. But in reality, the signs of habitation were minimal, making it very likely that Ton Lakan only used this place as a stopover, not as a regular residence. His caution and secrecy only made the investigation team more suspicious. In the end, they sealed the door. The informant reported the request to contact the police and then withdrew, continuing to assign people to keep watch and wait for another opportunity to approach. Also on the afternoon of March 19, 2006, another investigative team, following Sun Lakan's personal records, went to the address listed on his ID card, but the property had already been transferred to someone else. The people living nearby said he had moved away a long time ago, and no one knew where he was currently residing or how he was living. On March 20, 2006, the technical team conducted a DNA test on the semen sample collected from the body of the victim, Ton Tin Ni. The results showed no match with any criminal DNA data in the system, meaning the suspect had never been recorded before. This rendered the direct comparison method ineffective. Nevertheless, the police carefully preserved the sample, hoping it could be compared if samples from other suspects were collected. Regarding the victim's belongings, the investigative team continued to search for her handbag, jewelry, and mobile phone. They visited flea markets and pawn shops around Mok Chau and Hong Shuyen, in case the perpetrator tried to sell the stolen items. However, no results were obtained because all the pawn shops required legal identification from sellers. If the perpetrator was cunning, they might have already moved the stolen items out of the area. At the same time, the Criminal Investigation Department reported new information. Someone had seen a woman with a middle-aged man in an old car at around early afternoon on March 11, 2006, about 20 kilometers east of Mok Chau district. The woman was wearing a pink dress and matched the victim's description. The man had a mustache, fit the description, and appeared to be in his 40s.